Welcome to Channel's Business Globe with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, the state opening of Parliament took place in the British capital this week, marking the beginning of a new parliamentary year. The King's speech outlined a wide range of bills that the new Labour government plans to introduce, addressing issues such as fiscal responsibility, pensions and energy. Our Downing Street correspondent Simon Pusey will shortly be joining me in the studio with the highlights. And with Nigeria's inflation reaching 34.19% in June, citizens are urging the government to take action to address the food security situation. During a visit to Abuja this week, I sat down with Senator Saliu Mustafa, Chairman Senate Committee on Agriculture Production, Services and Rural Development, for an update on measures being implemented to tackle food insecurity across the country. Then later, I got an exclusive invitation to Munich last week to test out Canon's new advanced technology cameras, designed to make filmmaking more affordable for content creators in Africa. But first, leaders from across Europe gathered at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, England yesterday for the fourth meeting of the European political community. The summit, hosted by Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, brought together around 50 leaders, including Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky. Discussions centred on pressing issues including continued support for Ukraine, tackling illegal migration and enhancing security cooperation. The new UK government also used the summit to strengthen relationships with key European partners.
Good evening. Thank you all very much for being here. We are going to deepen our cooperation on defence and security and on illegal migration, where we are resetting our approach, and that's been central today. We are going to smash the gangs, break their business model and secure our borders. And we'll do this not by committing taxpayer money to gimmicks, but with practical solutions that are in line with international law. To stop illegal migration, we must also tackle it at source. So today I'm announcing £84 million of new funding for projects across Africa and the Middle East. That includes humanitarian and health support, skills training, help with job opportunities and access to education. We're increasing the UK presence at Europol in The Hague to play our full part in the European Migrant Smuggling Centre. We've agreed new cooperation arrangements with partners like Slovenia and Slovakia to disrupt organised crime, and with our new Border Security Command. We are going to work with our European partners to share intelligence, data, expertise, and put the gangs out of business. There's no easy silver bullet. If there was, it had been fired a long time ago. It's difficult, it's hard, it's challenging. But I'm absolutely convinced it's a very serious problem and it requires a very serious response. And that's why we have put to one side the gimmick of Rwanda and are pursuing the serious response, which is to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade. The appetite, I think, is for a UK which is, as it were, back on the international scene, playing a leading part with maturity and with a different stance in relation to our relations with Europe, both inside the EU and beyond. And yes, we do want to get a better deal than the deal that we've got at the moment. We understand the challenge and constraints of any discussion, of course we do. But I do think there's a closer relationship to be had that includes trade, that includes education and research, and includes security.
Elsewhere, King Charles III delivered the King's speech at the state opening of Parliament this week, marking the formal start of the parliamentary year. The speech, written by the newly elected Labour government, outlined the legislative agenda for the coming parliamentary session.
My Lords, pray be seated.
The government's plan for the coming session include legislation to renationalise the railways, strengthening the rights of workers, tackling illegal immigration, reforming the House of Lords, and undertaking a programme to speed up the delivery of high-quality infrastructure and housing.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government will govern in service to the country My government's legislative programme will be mission-led and based upon the principles of security, fairness and opportunity for all. Stability will be the cornerstone of my government's economic policy, and every decision will be consistent with its fiscal rules. It will legislate to ensure that all significant tax and spending changes are subject to an independent assessment by the Office for Budget Responsibility. My ministers will get Britain building, including through planning reform, as they seek to accelerate the delivery of high-quality infrastructure and housing. They will also pursue sustainable growth by encouraging investment in industry, skills and new technologies. My ministers will bring forward legislation to improve the railways by reforming rail franchising, establishing Great British Railways and bringing train operators into public ownership. Taken together, these policies will enhance Britain's position as a leading industrial nation and enable the country to take advantage of new opportunities that can promote growth and wealth creation. My government recognises the urgency of the global climate challenge and the new job opportunities that can come from leading the development of the technologies of the future. It is committed to a clean energy transition which will lower energy bills for consumers over time. A bill will be introduced to set up Great British Energy, a publicly owned clean power company headquartered in Scotland, which will help accelerate investment in renewable energy such as offshore wind. Legislation will be brought forward to help the country achieve energy independence and unlock investment in energy infrastructure. A bill will be introduced to modernise the asylum and immigration system, establishing a new border security command and delivering enhanced counter-terror powers to tackle organised immigration crime. A bill will be introduced to raise standards in education and promote children's well-being. Measures will be brought forward to remove the exemption from value-added tax for private school fees, which will enable the funding of 6,500 new teachers. A bill will be introduced to allow local leaders to take control of their local bus services. A bill will be introduced to progressively increase the age at which people can buy cigarettes and impose limits on the sale and marketing of vapes. My ministers will also legislate to restricted advertising of junk food to children, along with the sale of high caffeine energy drinks to children. A draft bill will be brought forward to ban conversion practices.
Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our Downing Street correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, so on Wednesday, we witnessed a significant event in the British political calendar, which is the state opening of Parliament, which is like the formal beginning of the new government. Lots of pomp and ceremony. Some said it was a bit distasteful considering we are living in a cost of living crisis, but quite important because, of course, several pieces of legislation were announced to kind of start of the Labour government. Talk to me about some of the highlights.
Yeah, so it's a big day in the calendar. It's one which looks pretty archaic when you're watching it. It's the King and the Queen in a carriage, a horse-drawn carriage, and they go through London a very short distance, but there's helicopters following them, and it's all televised and things. But this is Sir Keir Starmer putting out his plan for government, and the main sort of headline, I guess, from it is that he's going to take the brakes off Britain and put the country on a path to national renewal. That's what he said, at least. And the main way he's doing that is changing the planning laws to allow it to be easier to build houses. So that seems to be the main headline thing. And I think across the board, really, people are thinking that that's probably quite a good idea.
Yeah.
You know, rental prices, housing prices have never been higher. It's very hard to get on the property market at the moment. And so to get Britain moving in a business sense, this seems to be a sort of pretty easy
manufacturing
win.
and construction as well. Great
Exactly,
for them.
yeah, it's going to be, so that's the main sort of thing. There are other things, proposals to give local leaders more powers, bring the railways into public ownership. That's very much a Labour policy as opposed to a Conservative policy. The Conservatives would never do that, but the railways are going to go back into public ownership, as was the case several decades ago. And other things like that he's going to keep the smoking ban that Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives brought in. That's generally, I think, agreed as being a fairly good thing. And also the introduction of a football regulator. That's something the Conservatives had already planned as well. And it's really interesting to see Rishi Sunak's response to it compared to maybe America or other countries where Rishi Sunak seems to be loving opposition.
My
He's
goodness.
making jokes that are landing. Everyone seems to like him.
The rhetoric has really dialed down.
Yeah, and he's sort of agreeing and wishing the best of luck to the Labour Party, congratulating them on their win. It seems so polar different to what's going on in the United
cutthroat
States.
yet, although we're going to get there.
Of course, it will go back to the way it was before. But I mean, just from Rishi Sunak, he seems to be so much better in opposition. He seems to be so much more likeable and so much more chilled, and seems to just come across a lot better. Having said that, there was criticism. There was no mention of the scrapping the two-child benefit cap, which many Labour MPs have been calling for. The SNP have been pushing for. Jeremy Corbyn coming out and saying why you're basically delaying it, because they did introduce something. They did talk about children's well-being bill, which aims to raise standards of education and protect children. But the latest figures show that around 1.6 million children are missing out on thousands of pounds a year. And I think a lot of Labour MPs will be saying, this is an open goal, why didn't you take it? And it just it just jarred seeing King Charles wearing a huge crown.
With children carrying
his robe to say that we don't have enough money to give people in poverty, just jarred a little bit there. Rishi Sunak saying that net zero puts necessary public consent at risk, talking about basically, why are we going after net zero in the way we are when we should be protecting jobs here? So there was a few sort of little bits of criticism, but I think the main thing is that Sir Keir Starmer has always been talking about the economy, getting Britain moving, getting investment in.
It's not going to be easy.
It's not going to be easy, and he did say there's no quick fix. He warned against the snake oil charm of populism. So there was no sort of big announcements, flashy announcements that was really unexpected. But I think most people think that the economic growth and the way to do that is building houses and infrastructure and changing the planning system that makes it easier to do that. Because we do live in a country which is quite archaic, has a lot of rules and regulations over the decades, which means it is quite hard to, if you go to developing countries like China, they can build a street in a week.
Yes.
But we have a lot of, and a lot of them very necessary, a lot of them aimed at public safety.
But maybe to change and adjust.
I think to speed that process up, I think, and I think across the board that's basically got very good approval. And I think, fair to Labour, we said it's going to be tough. There's not going to be much of a honeymoon period. I think we're still in the honeymoon period. I think generally they seem to be doing pretty well, enjoying it. Obviously football didn't come home under their leadership, which I think Sir Keir Starmer wanted. He was boasting about how England hadn't lost while under a Labour government. They now have. But I think generally they're doing pretty well. Rishi Sunak seems to be enjoying life, as does Sir Keir Starmer. So I think for the first time, it's all rosy in the House of Commons.
It is. The velvet gloves are on. Let's wait for the boxing gloves to come off soon. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you.
Let's change gears now. Canon has announced the launch of two new cameras, the EOS R1 and the EOS R5 Mark II, aimed at professional filmmakers. Both products offer advanced features and technology to help African filmmakers elevate their productions and share their stories with a global audience. Last week, I was one of a limited number of content creators who were invited to Munich by Canon to test the new cameras before the official release. Coming up on Channel's Business Global, with Nigeria's inflation reaching 34.19% in June, citizens are urging the government to take action to address the food security situation. During a visit to Abuja this week, I sat down with Senator Saliu Mustafa, Chairman, Senate Committee on Agricultural Production, Services and Rural Development, for an update on measures being implemented to tackle food insecurity across the country. And distinguished members of the Niger Delta Development Commission, led by Senator Asuko Ekpenyong, Chairman, Senate Committee on NDDC, were in Coventry to witness the graduation ceremonies of students who were given postgraduate scholarships as part of its mission to facilitate the sustainable development of the Niger Delta. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Nigeria's inflation rate has surged to 34.19% in June, up from 33.95% in May. This is according to the National Bureau of Statistics. The alarming trend has sparked widespread concern among citizens who were urging the government to take action to address the food security situation in the country. The rise in inflation has been attributed to a number of factors, including the depreciation of the naira, rising fuel prices, and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy. The situation has been exacerbated by the recent removal of fuel subsidies, which has led to a sharp increase in the cost of transportation and other essential goods and services. During a fleeting visit to Abuja, I sat down with Senator Saliu Mustafa, Senate Committee Chairman on Agriculture Production, Services and Rural Development, for an update on measures being implemented to tackle food insecurity across the country.
Inflation is due to certain economic challenges we're facing, which I know the economic team, headed by the Minister of Finance, who is the coordinating minister for the economy, are working around the clock to see that they do the needful, especially in the areas of our earnings. Our petrodollar has not been doing very well, which has affected some of our reliance on other sectors of the economy. But I can assure you, with a view of insight on what I know the team are working around the clock to do, I believe with some of the new policies being introduced, especially bringing CBN on board too now, to see that they stabilize the naira to the dollar, I'm sure before the third quarter or the end of the third quarter, we should be seeing some significant improvement. I'm aware the Ministry of Agri is working with WFO, World Food Organization, and also there's another organization again I know they are working with, so as to make sure, one, the right and the quality nutrition is being served, especially to the school, the school bracket, or those within the school bracket, because the younger ones must have proper nutrition so as to be able to grow. And if you have a generation that
Stunted growth,
then it's as good as you have a failed nation. Then there's some other aspect that we don't look at, preservation. I know the ministry has embarked on making sure farmers or farm produce are properly preserved so as to be able to meet up the market demands. It is also a problem and a challenge when people harvest, for instance, watermelon, tomato, and they are not able to preserve it for a week to take it to the next value chain. Then you see sudden inflation in prices. I'm aware there is a program between Federal Ministry of Agri, Rural Development, and even the World Bank, which is called RAMP, Rural Access Road to Market, so that produce can easily get to the urban areas. Because sometimes we suffer a lot of harvest loss. And when you suffer that, then the little that can get to the market will be sold at a premium.
It sounds like an infrastructure, last mile logistics.
So I'm aware of all these programs and efforts by this administration to make sure the farm produce get to the urban area, the access road is provided, facilities for preserving some of these stuffs are provided, and then the storage facilities. We had silos that were not put into use for some time. Our food reserve has not been 50%. It has not been in 50% capacity for the past how many years? Is this administration that came in now that is making sure that, look, for whatever it is, you must plan to have a strategic food reserve for days like this, which sometimes it might be climate problem that will make you lose a lot of harvest. You need to fall back immediately. I can assure you that in the last 2-3 weeks, farmers have been receiving fertilizer free of charge. And these are some of the things that will increase the yield. I was on a trip with the Minister of Agriculture about a month and a half ago. The presidency have also, in looking at mechanized farming, placed a direct purchase order for tractors. And I think if this government can provide 20,000 tractors in 5 years, I think it's a major boost to agriculture.
20,000?
20,000.
20,000?
Yes.
Is that enough?
It's not enough, but if over, or in the past 20, 30 years, not 1,000 tractors was imported to this country by government.
Now to my final topic. Distinguished members of the Niger Delta Development Commission, led by Senator Asuko Ekpenyon, Chairman, Senate Committee on NDDC, and the CEO of NDDC, Dr. Samuel Ogbuku, were in Coventry, in England, to witness the graduation ceremonies of students who were given postgraduate scholarships as part of NDCC's mission to facilitate the sustainable development of the Niger Delta.
The reason why we do this is, and let me just take you back to yesterday. Yesterday in Abuja, I was sat in the Executive Council at the Villa, and the President was launching the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, NEL Fund, and his remarks, the opening statement in his remarks was that education is the greatest weapon for which you can use to fight poverty, and I couldn't agree more. Today, the NDDC sponsors annually 200 scholars to universities for postgraduate degrees spread across Europe, spread across America. And it does that to enable them come to the center where people, the best minds from all around the globe, come to educate themselves, come to compete, come to learn and forge a network. That is the only way we can develop our people. That's the only way we know we can develop our region. So on an annual basis, we sponsor 200 students from the 9 states of the Niger Delta region. And over the years, the process in which these scholars are selected has become based on merit. It's an extremely transparent process, and it shows, the evidence is in the results. When you see the results of the graduates, this set alone, all 200 scholars graduated with exceedingly good marks, and in fact, 11 of them came top of their class with distinctions. That shows that the process is working. We're aiding our people to get a better opportunity at education, and we expect them to bring that to bear in the Niger Delta region as they return home.
Of course, I'm very, very happy today. That is why you can see on my team we have the chairman of the Senate Committee on NDDC, the EDFA, the Director of Education, and 1 or 2 staff that are here too, to celebrate them, because it will not be nice that having attained this feat, we just abandon them just to be here on their own. At least let the school also know that they are also well celebrated back home.
Well, a full report of the ceremony will be available online after the show. Sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I will see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global. Goodbye.